Good morning and welcome to the MAPS 4 Citizens Advisory Board meeting for May 4th, 2023. We will move on, we'll call the meeting to order. Moving on to item 2, items for individual consideration, approval of minutes. Your minutes were included in your packet. If you've got any changes, please say so. If not, motion in a second. Please cast your votes. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Moving on to item B, receive the monthly MAPS 4 financial report ending March 31st.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you said, you have the financial report for the period ending 3/31/23 in your packet. On the revenue side, $11,040,465, fiscal year of $110,005,621, and total of $371,158,241. On the expenditure side for the month, $2,693,923, fiscal year of $11,626,980, and total of $112,869,146. I'll try to answer any questions if you have any.
Yes, Bob.
Just assume the zero interest is a timing thing that we would earn interest.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And I see that we're still a little bit ahead of the forecast, 1.5%, so we'll take that too. So if any other questions? If not, I take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item C, presentation on the MAPS 4 transit planned growth, the BRT alternatives.
Sure. So we'd like to give you an update on what's been going on with the BRT. Joe Gibson is here today to run us through what all the hard work that the Kimley Horn team has been doing for the bus rapid transit.
Thank you, David. Good morning. We're happy to be here and provide an update on the project. So today we wanted to provide an engagement summary on round 1. Last time I was here, I was kind of previewing what's to come, so we'll report back to you all on that engagement. Then we're going to talk about our screening process, both with the alignments and our preliminary recommendations, and then we'll talk next steps and open it up to questions. So just to recap and remind you all, this is about an 18-month study, and we've broken it up into 3 phases. So the first phase, the navy blue line up top, is the discover phase. So this is deep existing conditions analysis, stakeholder engagement, really understanding the transit needs, and understanding the many different ways in which we could serve each community with BRT. And then moving into the refine phase, which is where we are now, we have about 3 alternatives for each community that we want to study much deeper. And ultimately, at the end of this year, selecting one alignment or alternative for each community to recommend move forward in advance. And all along the way, which we'll talk about, we are conducting stakeholder engagement and public engagement. So to recap the discover phase, as I mentioned, a lot of community input, stakeholder engagement, technical analysis, which led us to that universe of alternatives, which is many different possible ways for BRT routes, and then ultimately going through back to our goals that we talked about with you last time, We're evaluating those different alignments to come up with the high potential alternatives that we're going to talk about today. So big picture, this is the discover phase of which has led us today to these high potential alternatives in which we're going to study in further depth. So to recap our first round of engagement, we held 6 public meetings and we had 5 pop-up events. We talked a little bit about that last time, but we engaged roughly about just under 200 people in person. And we dispersed kind of our meeting locations, et cetera, throughout both study areas. And so just to give you some kind of the engagement results, we had 151 paper survey responses, and we got feedback from the community about their desires for BRT. So we heard a lot about how people want to connect to particular places where they want to go, the importance of frequent service, on-time service, a lot of good conversations around how BRT could support the business community, and then importantly, really that BRT should be accessible by all groups of people. We also had an online tool for survey and a map really gauging specific feedback on key destinations. And so just to summarize a few, we heard about the importance of, in both the northeast and south, about how important it is to serve healthcare facilities, grocery, shopping centers, as well as a lot of good comments about service to low-income housing areas. And so we had just about 450 map responses, which is pretty good. We felt good about that. So to preview our upcoming engagement for round 2, that covers that refine phase, which we're going to be talking about particular preliminary alternatives to get community feedback on. We are going to have public open houses, pop-up events where we go to summer street festivals, we go to the downtown transit center. We're also going to have fact sheets with the preliminary alignments, and then a social media campaign, and we're working on a promotional video to really get it out there to the community that we want their input. And we're just kicking off this month and in June. And so just to preview a little bit, we will be at the 1OKC event this weekend, passing out postcards, and our revised or updated website with the survey is going to be live with our 3 different preliminary alternatives asking for feedback. We also just have identified a few open houses at the libraries, and so more information will be on our Maps for BRT website. It will be live this Saturday. So moving on to our alignment screening. So just to remind us and recap, the bars on the left were the goals that we developed for the project. So importantly, connecting communities and resources, facilitating prosperity and economic growth, expanding equitable mobility options, and moving people efficiently, and then utilizing available resources. So those were our overall project goals. And then our technical work on the right used the US Census, Embark ridership, certainly a lot of current and future land use information to really be able to assess how these preliminary alternatives would work or would score against our goals that we identified. So that's our methodology of how we came up with these 3 preliminary alternatives. So wanted to walk through both Northeast and South preliminary alternatives. And just saying from the outset, this is the starting point for studying and evaluating these routes, and I fully expect that likely the locally preferred alternatives of what we recommend is the alignment will be some combination of these 3, because we're going to learn a lot from the community and from technical work on which alignment, the ultimate configuration of our preferred alignment. So just starting with the yellow, so you can see all of them start out of the Santa Fe Depot in downtown. So the yellow comes up Broadway, goes east on 13th, goes north on Lottie to Northeast 23rd, then making its way up to the Adventure District. The purple, or I guess that's pink, goes on North Lincoln Boulevard, serves the Capitol Complex. And then east on Northeast 23rd up MLK to the Adventure District. And the purple alignment here goes out of downtown on Northeast 8th Street and then makes its way up on MLK. And the purple alignment has the least amount of turns, just to note, which is, overall good for speed in terms of minimizing turning movements. So for the south, I'll walk through the same thing. So again, coming out of downtown from Santa Fe Depot, the light blue goes down South Walker, serves Capitol Hill neighborhood, and then moves over on Western, going south, going west on Southwest 59th Street, going down May, serving OCCC, and then these alignments all end roughly in the Amazon warehouse area. The darker blue starts down Shields, goes across Southwest 25th Street, down Southwestern, across on Southwest 74th Street, and then serving OCCC as well as the Amazon facility. And then finally, the green alignment here, down Shields, west on Southwest 29th Street, down South Pennsylvania, jogs over on Southwest 59th Street, and then down on May. So you can see both from the northeast and south, there's pros and cons for all three of these preliminary alignments. And our task over the next several months is to really dig deeper, work with the community, do a lot of technical analysis, assess the trade-offs, and then we'll be back with a recommendation based on that analysis and community input. So moving forward, those two study areas together, here's how we're moving forward. We're evaluating and studying the BRT typologies, including mixed traffic. So that's a BRT vehicle in a general purpose lane, curbside dedicated, and center running is just simply a bus-only lane on either the center or on the curbside on the right. So we're digging deep into these alignments and assessing how BRT could be configured in each alternative. We are also taking the approach of investigating and really discovering to see what would it mean if we could dedicate at least 50% of the alignments for a dedicated bus-only lane. And the reason that we're doing that, we're assessing that and investigating that, is because there are benefits, financial benefits for operation and maintenance that FTA provides financial support if it meets a 50% threshold. So we're going to be evaluating that and assessing the trade-offs, and that's going to be a part of our work the next several months. And then I did want to point out to you all is that if you see there's a gray dashed lines, those are high-capacity transit routes being studied by the region, by RTA. And so, this work is being coordinated closely with the broader system work as a whole, because of course, it's really important that we understand how these particular routes would function in the network. With that, I'll end on kind of our next steps. So over the next several months, we're in the refine phase. We're going to be starting to develop guideway concepts. That's really the section of the particular streets and understanding turning movements, developing a concept of operations. So at a planning level, what would the headways be, travel times, et cetera. And then starting to think about and place station locations. Then we're going to go deep into evaluating each alternative and assessing the performance. So importantly, understanding what the potential ridership would be for each alternative, assessing the cost for each alternative, understanding if there are any environmental impacts, and then finally really taking a look at the transportation network as a whole and assessing any the traffic analysis. And then finally, based on all that, we expect to modify our alignments, right, with a preferred alternative based on our findings. So this orange column is trying to communicate that it's likely going to be a combination of these alternatives we've presented today, based on what we find. And with that, happy to answer any questions, open up to discussion.
Any questions for Jill? Bob?
I've got several questions. Curious on the northeast and south, you presented 3 alternatives. Will you ultimately wind up with one route in each segment as opposed to, say, having a route that would go at 10 a.m. and a different route that would go at noon and a different route at a different time of the day?
Yeah, we'll have one route, one alignment, one route that we recommend for both. So the routes won't change based on timeframes. So we're recommending one alignment at the end of this.
Okay. And I noticed in the early part of the presentation, the survey results, there was little focus, little input from the northwest quadrant of the city. Is that to come later, or is that just not a focus of BRT right now?
Outside the study area, or the northwest quadrant of?
Just the northwest quadrant of the city, out around Lake Hefner and up toward the Kilpatrick Turnpike. That's the area that I represent, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, we opened up the survey, of course, to everyone, but we were really focusing on and promoting input specifically in the study area. So that's likely why there was not as much input outside the study area in the northwest quadrant.
Will that area be studied at some point, or is the BRT focus really on those 2 sections that we looked at?
Bob, that area is getting a BRT right now.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's under construction, so that's already been done.
Okay.
And these were put in maps 4 to help promote BRT in other parts of the city.
Okay. Well, you can tell I'm automobile oriented and don't usually use the bus service, so I'm not as clued in as I should be about the service available.
Well, the good news is the Northwest BRT is being tested right now. I saw a vehicle yesterday in downtown, so the service is coming.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Daisy, did you have a question?
Oh, I would say that they're all going to come in.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for Jill? Shay?
So I'm in the southeast part of the city, and it's still heavily rural, but is there anything on the horizon for that area? I'm actually like right around Lake Draper, so it's pretty out there.
So this map shows kind of the system plan for high-capacity routes.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's the only thing that.
Jill was tasked with, as the maps resolution of intent said, that there would be one northeast and there would be one south. And so she's been tasked with finding those corridors with most possible ridership. And as you said, being rural, I think it's going to be a while before you see anything like that.
I expected as much, which I just thought I'd see if there was any surprises.
Now, not all of Ward 4 is rural. You know, it goes up into South Oklahoma City and the Capitol Hill area. So to say that Ward 4 won't get anything, I think is misleading, but certainly the rural areas out there in Southeast, it'll be quite some time.
Thank you. Great questions. Anything else? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
So much. Okay, moving on to item D, construction update presentation for the MAPS 4 Downtown Arena Phase 1B seating replacement.
So continuing with our updates for you with projects, Kevin Cook is here from Populist to talk about the seat replacement.
Okay, welcome, Kevin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again. This is quick and is related also to the next item, the agenda, the change order for the fixed seating. So just a quick update on the Paycom Arena. Now that the NBA season is complete for the Thunder and summer's rolling in, the building is really opening up with fewer events so that they can get a lot of work done this summer. So the seating that's already going underway, which I'll show you here in a second, we'll definitely finish this summer. And then the scoreboard package, the scoreboard is going to begin next week. They're going to start taking down the existing scoreboard in the middle of the arena. The elevators that were part of a previous contract are beginning this week already, which is good to see. And then the retractable seating will be starting in June. So there's going to be a lot of work in the building. This today is just a quick update of what's going on with the fixed seating, and I'm sure I'll be back to show some of the progress on the other areas. So looking at this here, this is back in middle of April. We've got a couple of overall views, and what you kind of can see here on the lower level below those white signs, that's the lower level. All of the fixed seating has been finished and complete in those areas. You'll see there's kind of a discrepancy of color between the top half of that section is blue and then the bottom half is black. So the blue are the fixed seats that are new and the black is the retractable seating that will go away. The contractor is now on the middle level, the 200 level, and they're working their way around that. You can kind of see a little bit of blue in the back there by the Riverwind Casino loge boxes. There's some new blue seats going in those sections. But the contractor has started to move around that and is actually about 2/3 of the way done around that level already. So again, you've seen some of these similar pictures, but you know, the new seats have a blue finish plastic and fabric material. These are sections 105, one of the last couple sections they had to get done at the lower level. And then what they do is they set up each of the chairs after they remove all the existing chairs. They go in, they pre-drill the concrete treads, mount the brackets for each of the seats, and then come in and install the actual seats to the brackets for the chairs. So quick, that's a real quick short update, but I will say that the schedule for this project is they intend to finish the level 200 level by next week, they hope, middle to end of next week, and they'll jump right up to the 3rd level. And they're looking to be finished with Loud City sometime in July. So that seems like a lot, but Loud City has the majority of the seats in the biggest sections for everything to get installed up there.
Great. Any questions about the presentation? Okay, so moving on to item E, recommend approval of change order number 2 for the Downtown Arena Phase 1B seating replacement, increase of $66,006.06.
Yes, so Kevin can go ahead and explain that.
Yes, please.
So there's 4 items in this change order, all related to the fixed seating. And so this first item is what we've been calling camera well platforms and seating. This is up at Loud City, up in the 3rd level. There's 6 of these like notches in the concrete and the seating where they used to put cameras for game days, for TV cameras. They don't use those camera wells anymore. They put the cameras lower on the other lower levels, and so these are just empty spots in the seating. And so we've already, through our bid, already purchased and have the seats to go in these sections, but what we need to do is build a platform. The first row of seats will be mounted directly to that concrete, and then a new platform will get custom built to fit in each of these wells to then create the second level, the second row of seats. So they'll be raised up, you know, the standard height, and they would match that row there already. So this is a $22,000 item. Item 2, this is the west side box. We showed this last month when we were here looking at the Phase 2 improvements. This is a premium suite box that they want to build in the lower sections of seating, and to help not have any conflicts with the actual seats that are being purchased for this, we look to keep those seats out of the actual Phase 2 drawings and purchase those seats through this current contractor. That way we were ensured that we would get the same manufacturer for the same seats, so that all the seats would match, because if it was bid separately, there's a chance you could have got a different contractor submitting different seats. So this is an $11,000, $252 change order item. Item 3, there's 2 sections in 101 and 111 where we had specifically made an alternate in our drawings to leave out the seats in these 2 rows, these 2 sections, for the opportunity to put in this unique type of another seating premium option for people to have another option to choose. And so you see the picture on the right, it's not exactly that. It won't be green and it won't have the tray table, but these are, you know, kind of a plush theater style seat that will be mounted. There will be 12 in each section, so 24 total. And it'll just add another option for people to choose from when they want to pick the type of seat ticket they want to purchase. So this is close to $24,000 for these seats. And the last item is something that's going to make you go back and hopefully remember a little bit. When we were initially planning the renovations and concept ideas for this building, we were actually going to remove a large section of Loud City at the end to create this large opening space for people to gather and have large groups be able to watch out into the games. This scope of work isn't happening anymore, and so we had deleted 44 seats up at Loud City to do this opening, and now we need to buy those seats back because the opening's not happening. So this is $8,767. So collectively, as you said, the total change order is $66,006.06. There's no change to the completion date. This will all be rolled into their overall scope of work. And what you'll see that this represents an increase of 2.13% from the original contract amount. And with change orders 1 and 2 added, we are now at $3.2 million. Any questions on
Any
this?
questions? So, Kevin, Bob, anything to add from venue committee?
Just it comes to the board with the unanimous recommendation, the venue subcommittee.
Okay, great. No questions, I take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. We don't have information or recommendation on item F, so we're going to strike that unless there's questions or discussion. Okay. Moving on to item G, recommend approval of engineering services contract amendment number 1 with Kimley Horn and Associates for the MAPS 4 bus stop improvements phase 1 of an increase of $97,100.
So this is the contract for the bus stops with Kimley Horn. We knew all along that we were going to have to make an amendment like this. When we negotiated their original contract, it was discussed that there would be right-of-way issues. And at that point, we would have to guess how many of the stops we would have this issue with. So what we chose to do is move on with it. They identified 87 bus stops that potentially need more right-of-way than what's available. So this is to compensate them for that. So they have to research that right-of-way situation, and if the right-of-way is needed, then they have to in turn provide exhibits and legal descriptions. So it's going to be an as needed, but we've identified 87 that appear that they need it, and there's $77,000 to do that first stage. So if we find some that don't need right-of-way, then we can stop at that point, and there could be some money come back on this. But like I said, we knew this all along that this was going to come up, but rather than just guess, we chose to push it to now.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. If not, I take a motion in a second to approve the recommendation. Please cast your votes. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item H, recommend approval of conceptual design report for the MAPS 4 Park Enhancements, Public Space Transformation, River Phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the vicinity of the First Americans Boulevard.
So this project was 3 to 4 projects lumped together, and we had about $9,500,000, somewhere in that ballpark, to do a pedestrian bridge, a low water dam, and some amphitheater improvements. Not knowing how that would get divided, we chose to do the original conceptual design report that Team Engineers is doing, and Chris Russell is here to give you a report on that conceptual report.
Okay. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I'll just go ahead and skip ahead. Yeah, since just an update on the conceptual report, our findings. So rough agenda for what I'll go over, cover some of the background information that we gathered. Then I'll start going through each of the 4 projects. That's the pedestrian bridge. That's about, you can see in this location map, that's upstream of the Eastern Avenue Dam. The low water dam, that'll be downstream of that, but before the Reno Avenue Bridge. Community gathering location, and the last project identified in the MAPS 4 package is the river beautification. Then I'll cover some of the environmental constraints that we reviewed for future compliance with all the federal, state, local environmental regulations. And then I'll summarize all the recommendations we have. So starting off, the program budget is just over $9.6 million. As David mentioned, we started with a conceptual report to get a good grasp of what could be constructed within this budget given the scale of these projects. And the next slide, I'll go through some of the utilities and property ownership that we gathered, along with survey and hydraulic data for the river. So after we gathered that information, we really started coordinating the construction schedule and the design of these projects with all stakeholders and other projects on the river in this area. So one of those would be the Embark Boat Landing Project, which is MC 0672. That's happening on the South River Bank on the Ocana site. With Oklahoma River Sport, we coordinated the design of the bridge, the pedestrian bridge, so that it wouldn't impact their rowing lanes. We've been in talks with the Ocana construction team since they are actively working on that site now, and the pedestrian bridge and the community gathering stage or location would be on that South River Bank. And then the last thing, we coordinated with the Public Works Department. They will have an upcoming project to do repairs to the Eastern Avenue Dam. So through this coordination effort, we determined that, I've mentioned the three major projects in the river itself. That'd be the bridge, the Embark project, and the repairs to the Eastern Dam. As we worked through the coordination, we decided that the best method of constructing all three of these projects, the most efficient and cost-effective, would be to lower the water in the Eastern Basin. So we've got a window of time that's mid-November of this year to the end of February of 2024. To that point, we coordinated that schedule, that window of time, with Oklahoma River Sport so that it would have minimal impacts to their events. So, same location map you saw a couple slides back, just stripped down to only show the utilities in black and the property ownership in red. Some of the utilities of note, there's an ONG gas line going under the river and an OG&E overhead transmission line. Those are both upstream of Eastern Dam. Running along the South River Bank, there's an Interfin crude oil line, and then just upstream of the Reno Avenue Bridge is a WOC gas line which goes over the river. As far as property ownership goes, Oklahoma City owns all of the land downstream of the Eastern Avenue Dam. Upstream of the Eastern Avenue Dam, AI-CCM Land Development, they own the Ocana site itself, as well as a strip of land on the North River Bank. I'll use the pointer here just to emphasize this triangular wedge area right there. That's the Embark lease area. That is where the Embark dock project will happen, as well as where the pedestrian bridge will tie in and the community gathering stage is going to be located all within that lease area. So starting with the first project, the pedestrian bridge. It's a 20-foot clear span, so that's from inside handrail to inside handrail. It's about just nearly 500 foot long, and that's made up of 5 spans over 4 bridge piers. Those piers, again, were specifically placed, and you'll see in the next slide, after coordinating with Oklahoma River Sport. And there's about a 14-foot vertical clearance from the water surface elevation of the Eastern Basin to the low chord, or that bottom beam of the bridge. So here's that, plan view looking down at the bridge. You can see the 8 rowing lanes for the Oklahoma River Sport, as well as a loading bay on the South River Bank and a warm-up lane on the North River Bank. For the pedestrian bridge, the structural elements of the pedestrian bridge, we looked at 2 options. That'd be concrete beams and steel beams. I'll get to the reasons for our recommendation in a couple slides here, but suffice to say, we are recommending steel beams for the pedestrian bridge. So constructability has been one of our key focuses on the bridge. How can it be done in a timely fashion, all of that. So once the water level has been lowered in the river, haul roads will need to be constructed from either riverbank, where the drilled shafts and the piers can be constructed, the bridge beams can be placed, and then the deck can be formed and poured. Once the deck has been substantially completed, we can construct the trails on either end. On the North Riverbank, that's that right image there, that's connecting to the Greenway Trail. So we have some paving, an ADA switchback ramp, as well as some reconstruction of the Greenway Trail just in case it gets damaged during construction of the bridge. The south connection, again, is contained fully in the Embark lease area, and it just has the trail connection from the bridge as well as the ADA ramp over there. Here we have a conceptual rendering of the pedestrian bridge, this is looking south at the O'Connor site, and you can see the Embark project in the back there. This is what we are anticipating can be constructed, including amenities with the bridge at its initial construction. The next presentation later in the agenda, I'll go over some future amenities that could be added to the pedestrian bridge when funding becomes available, but the bridge will be designed to incorporate those, to handle those when they're added on. So, running through the total cost estimate, option 1 is the concrete beams, estimated just over $3 million. Option 2 is the steel beams. That, again, is our recommendation at $4 million. So, again, a reason for recommending steel over concrete beams. The concrete beams actually have a shorter design life over bodies of water. They have a thicker structural depth, so that's from that bottom of the beams to the top of the deck. So what that causes is steeper trail connections on either end of the riverbank. And then they're quite heavy compared to steel beams. Steel beams are about a third of the weight of the concrete beams. So that will require larger equipment, construction equipment in the riverbed, and could just limit the options that the contractor has to complete this work in a timely fashion. So, again, our goal is to have the bridge substantially completed, at least the piers and hopefully the beams while the water's down, but in the event that the contractor still needs to be in the river when the water has to come back up, we've allocated $2 million for a barge. For the north paving, that's estimated at $150,000. The south connection is $100,000, and the amount that we've allocated for bridge amenities, again, they can be constructed with the initial construction of the bridge, we have $750,000. So, combining all of that for our recommended steel beams as well as the contingency for the barge, the pedestrian bridge total estimate is just over $7 million. And I'll show these estimates again at the end of the presentation. Project 2 is the low water dam. These are some of our key criteria for designing the dam. 4-foot minimum pool depth, that's to cover the bottom of the river. No impacts with the new pool of water on the existing eastern dam's gate operations or maintenance. The ability for that new pool of water to be flushed out so that maintenance can remove sediment and debris that may collect. And then as well as maintaining the quality of water in that shallow pool, newly formed. So based on our hydraulic modeling at this time, we are anticipating the need for a CLOMR/LOMR, so that's conditional letter of map revision and letter of map revision. We'll need to file that with FEMA because of an anticipated a small raise in the base flood elevation in a U.S. governed body of water. Additionally, we will also need Oklahoma City flood ordinance variance for the same reason. For the low water dam, we looked at 2 alternatives. Alternative 1 is a fixed crest sheet pile dam. Essentially, that's a vertical wall driven into bedrock. It's 500 foot wide, and that'll extend into either riverbank. The goal of it extending into the riverbank is to prevent water from seeping through the soil underneath that new dam, so it maintains that pool elevation. At the top of the dam, it's got a notch in it that matches the existing channel width. The top elevation of that dam is specifically picked to match the existing eastern dam's stilling basin. So again, that was picked so that it wouldn't have any impact to the eastern dam's gate operations. Behind the proposed dam, we'll have some riprap or some large stone to prevent scour from happening. We also have a cap to cover the sharp edge of the sheet piling, as well as a notch located near the South River bank to allow maintenance crews to, again, open that up, flush it out for access and maintenance. Cost estimate for the alternative 1 of the dam is $1.9 million, and it is our recommended alternative. Alternative 2 is a Obermeyer Crest Gate Dam. Essentially, that's a rubber air bladder that can be inflated to raise and lower the crest gate. Otherwise, it has much of the same elements like the sheet piling going into the riverbanks for seepage protection. But what it additionally has is concrete to support the gate structure as well as create a new stilling basin downstream of the new gate. That in turn would require more sheet piling to support that concrete that's in the riverbed and a little more riprap at the end of that. As you can see, the cost estimate for alternative 2 is nearly the entire budget at $8.3 million, so that is why we've recommended alternative 1. And then the last element for the for the low water dam, a road will need to be constructed so the maintenance crews can get down to the site and remove debris and all that. So what we've looked at right now is about a nearly 700-foot long access road, as well as some reconstruction of the Eagle Lake Trail, which it'll have to cross. So that cost estimate for alternative 1, again, $1.9 million, alternative 2, $8.3, and the access road and that paving is $160,000. So with alternative 1 and the paving, the total cost estimate for the low water dam is just over $2 million. Project 3. As I mentioned before, it's located on the Embark lease area. So as we were coordinating with all of these projects and stakeholders, it was determined that the grading and the landscaping of that entire lease area are going to be done with the Embark project. So what that did for MAPS 4 is it really focused the design on the stage alone. So some of the design elements we've got for the stage will include a venue holding up to 2,400 people, a concrete oval stage with some storage below, as well as an overhead roof structure to cover a majority of that stage. And then it'll also need some electrical power and paved walkway leading up to the stage. So we have an allocated budget of $450,000 for the stage. The fourth project on this package is a river beautification. As you've seen up to now, the first 3 projects are going to take a majority of the budget. So the remaining funds have been allocated to Project 4, that's $115,000, but the extent of what can be done with river beautification and the scope of what that will include will really be dependent on what funds are available after construction of the first 3. So zooming back out, for the whole project site, all 4 projects, we looked at 3 key elements for environmental constraints or potential constraints. That includes hazardous materials, so that's checking for oil and gas well sites to make sure there's no impact, and we didn't find any. That's natural resources, so that's endangered species and impacts to waterways. We don't foresee any impacts due to endangered species. Obviously, we are going to be impacting the waterways, so we'll have to file some of those items I talked about. And the last one is cultural resources, cultural resources. So that is looking at historic sites, districts, and archaeological data. We don't foresee any impacts due to cultural resources either. Going forward, we will need to do some more coordination with different federal organizations and compliance with federal laws, that kind of thing, and state and local laws. That'll include U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We've already reached out to them for a pre-application meeting. So what that'll allow us to do is know exactly what forms we'll need to fill out and provide to them. So it's just a smooth process going forward. I mentioned previously the Clomer-Lomer and then compliance with NEPA and Clean Water Act. So just summarizing our recommendations, for the pedestrian bridge, we're recommending the steel beam option. That's $7 million, just over. For the low water dam, we're recommending the fixed crest sheet pile option. That is just over $2 million. The community gathering stage, we have allocated the $450,000, and the remaining $115,000 has been allocated for the 4th river beautification. So all 4 of those combined will use up the entirety of the program budget. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions for Chris? So my question is, you got it right on the nose, but most of the projects that we encounter typically have some expenses that we can't forecast. So it is should we be nervous that there's no excess, there's no
So there's
room?
contingency built in each of those.
Oh, there is contingency. Okay.
And what he's done is the additional improvements, we just rolled up the balance, and that's why it came out exactly that way.
Okay.
So that additional improvements piece will fluctuate.
Okay. Do you know off the top of your head what the percentage of the contingency was for each of the projects, or do you have just an overall contingency?
I don't know
built in?
offhand, but typically we were running 6 to 7%
Okay.
in the plan.
Okay. So So we've got enough cushion in there to absorb, probably. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. If not, thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate your presentation today.
I'll sit back.
If not, I'd take a motion in a second. Okay, please cast your votes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item I, recommend adoption of resolution approving engineering services contract amendment number 1 with Team Design for the MAPS 4 park enhancements, river phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 for an increase of $1,116,900 and authorizing the transfer of the MAPS 4 park enhancements river testing funds in the amount of $24,990 to fund the testing cost for amendment number 1.
So as you just saw, that was the conceptual report to figure out what the best use of the money is before we executed a contract for them to start designing this. Team has been a team player on this and has gotten out ahead of it to help us expedite some things, which you'll see on the next item. But this is their design contract for the items that Chris just described.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. If not, I take a motion in a second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item J, recommend approval of final plans and specifications to be advertised for bids for the MAPS 4 Park Enhancements Public Space Transformation River Phase 1 structural steel package for the pedestrian bridge.
So we're going to hear from Chris again why we're advancing this piece of the bridge project. So I'd like to turn it over to Chris.
Thank you.
Hello again.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and get right into it. A few of these slides will be what you've just seen, just kind of a recap. So just looking at all of the stakeholders and other projects in the area, plan and elevation view of the bridge, the proposed pedestrian bridge, all the coordination we've done with River Sport, Embark, Okana, Public Works, and then the need to lower the water. Same cross-section of the bridge with the steel beam specifically. And okay, so now we've got some new material. The anticipated completion date for construction of the bridge is December 2024. That'll time with the completion of the Okana project or site. And now going through the comparison of why we recommended steel versus concrete beams a little more in depth. Again, steel beams have a longer design life over bodies of water than concrete beams. Structural depth, it's about a foot shallower or thinner of a section for steel beams. Weight, like I said, steel beams about a third of the weight of concrete beams. Now, with all those benefits, we've recommended steel beams, but they do have a longer lead time. So that's between once they've been ordered to once they can be delivered to the job site. It's about 8 months is what we're seeing in the industry. So for that reason, we're recommending that Oklahoma City purchase them ahead of time, specifically just the steel beams. The rest of the bridge design and that bid will go at a later date. This is a summarization of our recommendations, same cost estimate you just saw. So moving past the steel bid package, looking at what amenities will be included with the initial construction of the bridge, as well as those future amenities that could be added on as funding becomes available. This first slide is just looking at the initial proposed, or rather base bid amenities. So what we're anticipating with that $750,000, what could be included with that is some symbols, stained concrete symbols in the bridge piers. So that'd be below the deck of the bridge. That could be, this is just one option, but it could be the same symbol throughout. It could be a variety of symbols. We'll work with stakeholders, the FAM site, Boathouse District, things like that to see what people want on the bridge piers, as well as handrail, metal hand railing on the bridge deck itself with LED lights, again, with the initial construction of the bridge. Moving on to the what future amenities could be added on, just how it could be dressed up in the future. We looked at several things, including a decorative panel running underneath the deck of the, hanging off the side, if you will, to cover up those steel beams. Backlighting, or rather, sorry, integrated LED lighting, which would include the light poles, that handrail lighting I mentioned, and the accent lighting, so that'll be behind the decorative panels as well as shining down on the bridge piers to highlight those symbols. And then on the light poles, we've also looked at adding banners with different symbols that, again, could reflect the community in this area, the stakeholders. So the rest of the presentation will just kind of be going through various renderings of what those amenities could include. Here we have 3 options for what the decorative panel could have. It's just a sheet metal with stamped, or rather patterns cut into that. So here we have just some tight arrows. Alternatively, some dot pattern just to accent the lighting, and then just a different variation of that. Now we'll see some other renderings, different times of day, so you just kind of see how the bridge could look throughout the day. As far as light poles go, there could be spaced at a variety of spacings. What we looked at was just 50-foot spacings on both sides of the bridge, just for one option. Here's those light poles with those LED lights. Same thing, just so you can see that they can be controlled, the LEDs, to change colors and all that. Just highlighting the metal hand railing. Looking over at the O'Connor site, and just kind of how the bridge would look in this area. And this is just a cross-section showing the architectural elements that could be included, including the initial construction and the future amenities. So just summarizing, again, we're recommending steel beams. Due to the lead time, we're recommending they get purchased now. Then we're looking forward at the anticipated schedule. I'll go ahead and use the mouse to point. These first kind of indented bullets are for the steel beams specifically. The second indents are for the rest of the bridge design. So these first 3 are kind of the critical ones right now. We're looking at having a pre-bid conference May 18th for the steel beams, opening those bids end of May, and awarding it mid-June. From there, throughout the rest of the year, we'll design the bridge and then put that out to advertise, award it. Again, we're looking to award it in November and start lowering the water in the river. Beams will hopefully be delivered beginning of 2024, in time for the contractor to place them after they've already begun work on the bridge, and then completing the bridge, like I say, before December 2024. So that's all I have. So again, if you have any questions.
Questions? Okay. Not, I would take a motion in a second to approve the recommendation. Please cast your votes. Okay, great, the motion passes. Moving on to our last action item, item K, recommend approval of change order number 2 for the MAPS 4 Fairgrounds Coliseum increase of $157,750.
So as you said, this change order for the Coliseum, when you start digging underground, you start finding things that you didn't know about, and also removing a piece of the existing building that was built in the 60s. They found some asbestos in there to remove that, underground utilities, fire line relocation, a utility boring, and some storm sewer removal. So some of these items, like the storm sewer, was things that were abandoned in the past, and they're still in there. So this comes with the approval from the subcommittee.
Okay, any questions? Okay, not. Motion in a second. Cast your votes. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, discussion items. Do we have anything? No, we lost our quorums. Yeah, okay. Nope, okay.
Don't have anything.
Okay, item 4, subcommittee reports. Do we have anything from subcommittees? Okay. 5, update status on the MAPS 4 program.
There's plenty to talk about in design, but what I'll report on now is the Coliseum is well under construction. There was an update given to the subcommittee. We've got currently about 60 of 180 piers drilled, and the pad is built. So if you go out there, you start seeing the size of the building. So everything else is moving along in design.
Okay, great. Comments by board, staff, or citizens? Do we have any citizens that have signed up to speak today? No? Okay, any comments by the board? Anything else from staff?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Moving on to item 7, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much for being here today. So, oh,